What was it that kept those 19 students there? I mean, do you have a perspective of that?
I think something that I've processed, which might be unsatisfactory for a podcast, it's a sobering thing to name why those 19 students said, or why was I the one, or why at Asbury. I don't know if I've ever said this, honestly.
Zach, how did you guys come to the decision to close it down? And on the other side of it, have you since looked back on it and said, did we do the right thing?
And everywhere I go, this question comes up. And what I've landed at, and people might disagree with this, but this has been something I've landed at, is God is not upset with my limits.
Hey everyone, welcome to Spirit and Truth. I'm so glad you're joining us today. And I have with me in the studio my friend, Zach Meerkreebs, all the way from Asbury University and Wilmore, Kentucky. And we've become friends over the last couple of years on the heels of the Asbury Outpouring. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with what took place. The Lord breaking in a really significant, powerful way at Asbury. And you were at the epicenter of that, helping to lead the charge, steward that. And on the heels of that, we become friends, have a lot of mutual friends. Yeah. And you're getting to spend a couple days here in the New Jerusalem, Kalamazoo, Michigan. Hallelujah. What do you feel about Kalamazoo?
Special.
It is.
Yeah.
It's
grateful to be here, though.
We're grateful to have you. Zach, maybe for everybody, just so we have context, just kind of introduce yourself. Tell a little bit about yourself, your background. I think that'll be interesting for people to know, and how you ended up at Asbury at the right time, at the right place when God broke in.
Yeah. So I have the honor of being married to Kristen. Kristen and I have 3 daughters, Eden, Esther, and Mercy. And I actually grew up in a Jewish home, Orthodox Jewish home. English is my 3rd language. All males in my family have been rabbis. And through some intense brokenness growing up, we moved out west from, we were living in D.C. at the time. We moved out west to Colorado Springs. And slowly but surely, I was meeting Christians. And really, I started taking notice of how the dads of guys on my soccer team treated their boys and treated their wives when they would have me over for dinner, or when we were going on, weekend trips for games, because I had so longed for a father and so longed for an example like that. And the common denominator, I was smart enough to notice that the common denominator, really what I first noticed, was they all prayed to Jesus before dinner. It was as simple as that.
Really?
And through that and some of these other things, I became more and more curious about Jesus, but was very intimidated and afraid to name that because of my Jewish faith and my family's not only faith, but just the history and
rabbinic history. I mean,
no joke. All the way back to like the Levites.
Yeah, so like every male in your family, you said this last night, has been a rabbi all the way back to the Levites.
Yeah, and so in that, found myself in a place being confronted, or biblically, my eyes had been opened. Like my eyes had been opened to Jesus as the Messiah, but it took about 1.5 years before I went all in. So on November 29th, 2006. By myself, I finally relented to Jesus as Lord.
It's incredible.
And immediately felt called to evangelism. What I've said is like, I immediately knew I had received the best news in the world. I joke that, evangelism or the gospel is so many times talking about like heralding the good news. I'm like, man, the good news is that I'm in Kalamazoo with my friend Lee. Like the good news is I'll get on a plane tomorrow and see my girls. The best news is Jesus died on the cross for my sins. And because of that, I don't have to rely on my righteousness or my efforts at righteousness. But I'm
just curious, when that happened in 2006, how did your family respond to that? I mean, Orthodox Jewish family, I'm sure that
anger, denial, and ultimately kicked me out of my house. Moved in with an amazing family, and then when I was baptized, they had a funeral for me.
Wow.
And but pretty immediately, the scriptures ministered to me. One, the worth of Jesus. That I was not martyred,
Right.
but like Jesus, when he looks at his disciples and says, "Let the dead bury their dead," like he was reorienting the worth. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
he was reorienting. Like that's super noble. But like I'm worth substantially more than sticking around for that. And so many high schoolers like would hear that passage, "Let the dead bury their dead," or "Who is my mother? Who is my,"
Right.
and be like, "That's weird." But for me,
It was
literal.
literal.
It was a gift. And so yeah, I really immediately kind of felt called to share the news, and that usually came with creating spaces where people would feel comfortable. So early on, it was parties. Then it was parties so that people would meet Jesus. Then I discovered church planting. I planted my first church when I was 18.
Wow.
Planted a church out of that church when I was 19.
Where'd you plant in 18?
In the Springs.
In the Springs.
Yeah. And they're all like curious kind of missional communities. I had gotten a tattoo when I was 18 and led my tattoo artist to the Lord. And then I found out that he had 2 apprentices, so we were going to lead them to the Lord because they had to come watch him tattoo. And then that turned into a network of kind of house churches, but instead of houses, it was tattoo shops. And then from that, we bought a hot dog stand and did street evangelism at the bars. And a bar gave us their party room to do a church service before we hit the streets.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So fell in love with church planting. And then everyone was like, "You should probably go to college." and because I didn't like know the Bible. I just was,
right.
I knew the gospel, but I didn't know, I knew the Old Testament, but I didn't know Christmas songs. I didn't know, I didn't know anything.
But you knew some Hanukkah songs.
Yeah, I did. Dreidel.
Dreidel.
So I went to college, and then honestly, out of some probably a lot of pride, I was so frustrated in college because I didn't want to talk about concepts or like buying pizza and youth program, and
right.
So I dropped out of school. Was a missionary, did some ministry, and during that time, KP and I started dating Kristen. I call her KP. I don't have 2 wives, if anyone needs to know.
KP's the other wife.
Yeah. KP and I started dating. We get married, thought we were going to be missionaries and plant a church in Israel. And the Lord sent us to Kentucky, what we thought for 2 years before going. But we've been in Kentucky since.
Was it Asbury that drew you to Kentucky?
No. So
I think that's what I thought.
Yeah, no. So I was a college pastor at a church. And most of my effort as a college pastor was towards University of Kentucky, which is like 20 minutes from Asbury.
Yeah.
And I had some students that would come to my ministry from Asbury, but Asbury was hard because, it's a Christian school. There's so many things programmed for them already. They go to chapel 3 times a week. And honestly, I don't know if I've said this to you. I wasn't a revival guy. I wasn't. And so many people down there were talking about revival so much that I was like, man, we're idolizing something from the 70s, y'all. Like, put your head down, lead people to Christ. Let's go. But over time, we ended up planting a church in Lexington. Tons of Asbury Seminary and students were there. So I started volunteering at Asbury University as a soccer coach because
that's it. That's fascinating.
So that's why I was on campus. So it was funny when everything popped off. They're like, "So what church do you pastor, or what's your role on campus?" I'm like, "I'm the volunteer goalkeeping coach."
How did you end up speaking at chapel then?
So they had found out that I had been a pastor.
Okay.
So they asked if I would speak in chapel. So I had spoken at a retreat, and then I had spoken actually in chapel the week before everything happened. So I started Romans 12 on February 1st and came on February 8th to finish Romans 12 about authentic love. And I ran out of time. I had 7 slides left. Click through my slides and say, hey, take a picture of the last slide. If you want to stick around, I'll be here till about 1:30. I have coffee with a student. And got off stage, texted my wife that it didn't go well and that I would be home soon for a nap. And yeah, pretty much everyone left besides the worship team and 19 students. And then slowly and surely people came back because people were texting and that.
What was it that kept those 19 students there? I mean, do you have a perspective of that? I mean,
I think
we've all been to chapels where it's like, let's get out of here.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, I think something that I've processed, which might be unsatisfactory for a podcast, is it's hard to, it's a sobering thing to name why those 19 students said, or why was I the one, or why at Asbury,
Right.
Everyone wants to know. I think it would probably help some of my interior battle.
Yeah.
But, I think what we're seeing among Gen Z is a level of hunger and a desire for authentic encounter, authentic love. And Romans 12 talks about let your love be without hypocrisy, or let your love be authentic. And then it lists, I think, 30 different explanations of how that would be.
Yeah.
And I invited them to stay. I just wonder how many times as leaders we could just invite them to stay and then curate and hold space to allow them to stay and linger with like a spiritual imagination of what God could possibly do, and but I didn't catch on until much later. Like, I think a lot of other people in the room were discerning a unique.
It felt something.
Before
something
I
shifted.
did. Yeah, before
you had left, right? Or were you
I didn't leave. I stayed.
Okay.
But I hadn't sensed, oh wow, like this is really special. Something's happening. Till about 3 or 4 that afternoon.
Really?
So that had been.
This was several hours after
5 hours.
Okay.
But around then, there was this, whoa. And to be very, very honest, it wasn't only, whoa, God is doing something, but because of my relationship at Asbury, I don't know if I've ever said this, honestly. It took me about 5 hours to figure out, well, God's doing something. And then it took me around at that same time when everyone was looking at me on what to do next in the room.
Yeah, yeah.
Of like, well, not only, whoa, God is doing something, but whoa, like I'm not the guest preacher anymore.
Right.
Like they're looking to me.
For leadership,
to
right?
lead.
Stewardship.
And then a couple hours later, we find ourselves in the basement. The president, a couple vice presidents, a friend named David, who has read and studied things like this. And we just kind of with curiosity said, I think we might be experiencing something here. Let's keep the chapel open through the night. And I had the joy of going upstairs and announcing that chapel was open through the night. And students, by that time, we had a full chapel again, about 1,400 students.
Really?
So throughout the day, and University of Kentucky students had driven down because they had heard through social media or friends something was happening. By that time, chapel was pretty full, and students scattered to go get like mattresses and sleeping bags to come move into chapel pretty much.
Wow.
And I was there till about 5 a.m, went home and thought that was the best day of ministry I've ever had. With like a hope that they're going to be there when I get back. And I remember I met with my boss the next morning and I couldn't sit still. And literally like 15 minutes into my meeting, I'm like, I am so sorry. I spoke at chapel yesterday at Asbury. I was there since 5 a.m. Like, I need to go. I remember parking like right in front of the chapel, which you weren't able to do after a couple of days.
Right.
I just and I sprinted up the stairs, open up chapel, and there's like 40 students who have stayed through the night worshiping. And by about 9 a.m, it was back full of students, no schedule.
Just word spread. Everybody just.
Yeah. So then within 3 or 4 days, it was the fastest hashtag in social media's history to 1 billion. And by like 3 or 4 days, we started having international guests.
Yeah.
I remember when we got word that colleges were sending buses of students down.
I remember we sent a group down that jumped in a 15-passenger from our school of ministry. It shot down there. I, on the other hand, as I told you,
we're suffering.
I was suffering for Jesus in Mexico on vacation, but ironically, and just crazy how that happened, I was sitting by a pool,
Travailing in prayer,
reading a book on reading a book on the Asbury Outpouring of 1970.
Yeah,
when my phone started blowing up with my friends saying, "Are you seeing what's happening at Asbury?" And social media just became like lighter fluid to it.
Yeah.
And I was so confused for a couple of minutes.
You thought they were like prophetically.
I'm like, how do you know what I'm reading?
Yeah.
It just was confusing to me. And then to realize it looks like God is moving, God is visiting Asbury again in a very significant way. So I ended up having a terrible case of FOMO because I wasn't there. I've never, ever in my history ever been able or permitted to like go into the center of an outpouring, like, when Brownsville took place or Toronto, and it doesn't matter what people think about those things, at least they were at the forefront of
what you've been longing for,
what we've been longing for, and what people were, calling outpourings and revivals. And for whatever reason, I've never been able or permitted or in the right position to go. So in this particular case, I wasn't either, but it was is astounding to sit back, even from the outside is my point, and to see the impact and really the global impact that the small little town of Wilmore, Kentucky had the attention of the entire church and really the world for a period of time. How long did it go on? I mean,
it went on for 16 days. And then after 16 days, through very difficult processing, praying, discerning, partnering with the local police, the university, leaders, churches, we decided to transition from public services. And that was terribly difficult, but it was the right call. And, we really prayed that it would be a catalyst, not a closing. And, I don't know what, I'm not bold enough or prideful enough, hopefully, to say Asbury started what we're seeing around the world, but I don't think it hurt.
Yeah.
I think it did envision a lot of people.
Absolutely.
On what could happen,
or that God could still do it.
Yeah. I think it gave hope, right? I've just been clinging to Galatians 6:9. Don't grow weary in doing good, for in due time you'll reap what you sow if you don't lose heart. And there's people like you who have been sowing and going for it. And now I feel like, if anything, I have a 16-day testimony that for the last 2.5 years I've traveled the world saying like, hey, dude, don't grow weary, man. Don't lose heart. Like, for some apparent reason, I saw something. Or it's like Joshua and Caleb in Numbers 13 and 14. Like, they saw the land. They gave a different report than the 10. And then for 40 years, they still hadn't gotten to the land yet. And I just think sometimes Joshua probably needed to like remind Caleb that he wasn't nuts. And Caleb probably had to check in once in a while and be reminded.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective.
That I feel like guys like you, our friend John, or, you are longing for something. And what I say is like, there's a lot of 10 spy reports. Like, oh, it's miserable. Like, just hold on as the ship goes down. But for some kind of reason, I got to see something that I look at guys like you and say, no, I have a different report.
Yeah.
But at times we do have to like I just think like Joshua probably had to remind Caleb that he wasn't nuts.
Yeah.
7 years in, 14 years in.
Right.
Like, whoa.
Did I imagine what we saw?
Or was I just young and stupid or
idealistic?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm in a season of 2 spy encouragement. Like,
So with that in mind, from the inside perspective, when you talk about anytime you talk about revival or awakenings or visitations, outpourings, whatever language you want to use to describe historic moves, I'm always curious because as you mentioned, I've read as much as I can get my hands on, and in the back of your mind, you're always thinking like, I'd love to sit with Jonathan Edwards in a really was it everything that the good and the bad? Was it as bad as and as difficult as they say it was? Was it as glorious as it was recorded? Because we all know that history is determined by what people write about it.
Yeah.
But with you being there as an insider, you're the Joshua, the Caleb that's gone in and experienced that. And I've heard other people as well. But it'd be interesting for me and for everybody to describe your observations. I'm sure you had to be and even now, journaling, thinking, processing, okay, what took place? What was the profound? What was the observable, distinct, this is different than anything else. This is obviously God. What were the signs in the midst of it of the divine presence of the Lord, and what were the things that were painful? What were the challenges in the midst of all that? I'd love for you to just break that down a little bit.
Yeah,
it's no small task.
Yeah. I didn't know this definition before, but I have since found this definition of, and sad to say, I don't know if it's revival is, outpouring is, awakening is, but I'll say it was Edwards' quote or definition of revival is the accelerated intensification of the ordinary work of God. Yeah. And what was crazy was I don't feel like the elements of what I experienced at Asbury were not unordinary. Is that the right way to say?
Inordinary. Yeah.
Inordinary. People came to Christ. People confessed sin. People made plans to do life together. People felt called to missions. People prayed. People worshiped. People rested. People were, that's ordinary work. People were healed. That's ultimately ordinary work, supernatural, but that's what God does. Now, what we experienced was the intensification and acceleration of that. And that was some of what we noticed was not only the numbers, but the intensity of those ordinary things. I'm an evangelist at heart.
Yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah. So leading people to Christ, how I put it, I joke because I wasn't a revival guy, but now I am a revival guy because it's a cheat code for God's mission. Mm-hmm. That's how I see it. It's a cheat code. It's cheat code. It's hard to lead people to Christ. It is hard.
Yeah.
It takes grit. It takes perseverance. But let's say if there was a supernatural outpouring of God's Spirit in Kalamazoo, let it be so.
Yeah.
I found evangelism under a faucet of outpouring at cutting butter with a warm knife. It became narration.
Wow.
Instead of explanation. You were just narrating, hey, bud, this is what you're experiencing. This is really what your next step's going to need to be.
That's really insightful.
Instead of, hey, this is the gospel, apologetics, a good preach. Bro, maybe it was the kindness of the Lord because he knows that I need it. But it was narration. It was hey guys. But that is what the Holy Spirit has come to do, is to exalt the Son. So when the Holy Spirit comes and exalts the Son in power, leading people to Christ isn't that hard. So it's the intensification and acceleration of that. The amount of people confessing. I've told this story. You've probably heard it. Literally the carpet at the altar for the first couple of days was wet with tears.
Soaked.
We had boxes of e-cigarettes. We had boxes of smartphones because people were sick of looking at porn. And they were just have it. You know what I mean? Like we were literally having conversations on what do we do with that. Calls to missions. Like it was really remarkable.
It's like compression. It's like
and some of that. One thing that also is really interesting that I've started naming and hearing some other people at the core naming is time went so fast.
16 days, did it feel fast?
I remember I would get there most days around 6 a.m. And before I knew it, I've missed lunch. Like, but it wasn't toil. It wasn't like, it was just like you within, it felt like minutes, but you had been there for hours, you know? And so time was strange. I know that sounds kind of spooky.
No, that makes sense though.
But time was strange. One cool story that I like is, you know, we live in such a lonely generation. You know, that's not only Gen Z, like there is an epidemic of loneliness. Yeah. I remember there was one time that in our leadership meeting, so we ended up sophisticating to a leadership team of like 7 at the core, sophisticated to like a next circle out was about 14 people. And that was like food, safety, volunteer training. And then, you know, supernaturally, we had just under 2,000 volunteers sign up spontaneously. You know, people were traveling out from all over the world just to serve, hold doors. And that's a supernatural thing. You know, we didn't have to we weren't asking people to volunteer, you know. But we were in this meeting and we were discussing what do we do because so many people are meeting each other for the first time in Hughes Auditorium.
Right.
And just wanting to visit. Just wanting to visit and laughing. It was like a family reunion. And I remember there was a number of people that were like, we can't have that. We can't have that in like there's people that have traveled to worship and pray, which is understandable. Honestly, like you lead a network of churches that if the Spirit of God's in there, it's gonna feel itchy if you just have a bunch of people talking and laughing. But I remember a leader in wisdom saying, maybe that's what the Spirit's doing. Is people are coming in lonely and leaving connected. So we ended up not stopping them. And people really have testified to like, I was lonely, I came in, and now I have friends that we meet every week for prayer and confession. Like that's the accelerated, intensified work or ordinary work of God, which is unbelievable. Now, anytime you use the words accelerated and intensified, you can think of crushing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like things are moving quick. You've got decisions to make.
How I put it is, you know, like race car drivers. I didn't realize this. I just was using this illustration talking to some leaders. Race car drivers train their core. And then so many race car drivers do these really intense neck exercises because the amount of G forces on them, they need to be locked in on the road. And because of how fast they're moving, their heads need to be strengthened. You know what I mean? So that's what like leading felt like, was you were feeling it in your body. You were feeling it in your spirit. It was crushing. Or like another illustration I use is G forces. The G forces were just so intense. You know, when a pilot takes off, or the G forces were so intense that the spiritual G forces, the physical G forces, the emotional G forces. And then anytime God's presence shows up, it reveals yuck, right? Yeah. When the heat turns up, it reveals yuck. So even something like this was very interesting. You're a leader. You're in a lot of roundtables of, you know, top tier executive leaders. It was moving so fast and our yuck was coming out so much that we would apologize and have to forgive each other on the run in a meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
So imagine if you and I we met every 3 hours, and I planned the next 3 hours, and you were offended that I didn't have you leading a moment, which is pretty normal for people.
Right.
So that happened, or I didn't feel like you listened to me, or I didn't feel like you took into consideration the area of what I'm leading. It would be like, hey, I just want to say that offended me. I need to say that. I don't feel like you're honoring what I'm bringing to the table. And then the person would say, I'm so sorry. Okay, move on.
Wow.
But it was like so intense that it almost felt like awkward. But
It's way better though than the long-term fermentation and bitterness.
So like
comes.
those are some things. How I put it was, I felt like I experienced 10 years of spiritual formation and 10 years of leadership formation in 16 days. And
I can only imagine the decisions that you had to make. You know,
And the
like,
cost
do we
of
keep
it.
going? Yeah, well, yeah, and the cost. Because every decision you make, for every 2 people that are happy, there's 3 people that aren't.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's pressure. There's pressure in awakening, where the pressure from the presence of the Lord, that barometric pressure of the glory of God that's there. But then there's also the pressure of our own concerns, decisions, the physical toll that plays into all of that. So you're managing 2 levels of pressure.
Yeah. Well, and then you also have the cultural, communal pressure of your hero is listening to you preach.
Yeah.
And wants to meet with you after. That happened to me almost every day. I remember one time I was preaching and I look into the balcony, and a gentleman who I have admired since giving my life to Christ is sitting like my eye shot center balcony, and he's staring at me. It's like, imagine if you're like
every insecurity,
a pretty average basketball player, and you're like, and you take a shot, and LeBron James shakes his head because he's actually in the stands, and you're like, frick, you know what I mean? Like, it was like that. It was, so you're having that, and then you're having absolute heroes, people that, let's say you listen to their music every day.
And they're there.
And they're there, and they want to lead worship, and you're making a decision to not let them lead worship.
Yeah. So tell me about that, real specific terms, because that was one of the hallmarks. Even before we knew each other, I remember knowing that certain people, well-intentioned people, obviously it drew somebody from the body of Christ that wanted to go and taste it and be a part of it. But one of the hallmarks that, at least what I observed, was you worked really hard, fought against having any celebrity, I'm using that word, celebrity leadership, or it just seemed like you were fighting against that, like fighting against platforming or trying to draw people as a result of that. It was really led by Gen Z. It was really led by a bunch of nameless, faceless, so to speak, not in heaven's terms, but in popularity terms. Was that something that was reactive? Did you intend to do that? Or was that something that kind of on the fly? I mean, did the Lord give that to you as a mandate in the midst of that?
Yeah, we wrestled with that a lot, because I know Jesus delights in all their gifts and their platforms, and have given them those things, right? So I don't think it was a mandate. It wasn't like we didn't set out to do it, because we didn't set out to do anything. Right. Yeah. I think what it was responding to what we saw God doing, and responding to what Gen Z was longing for, and it was a wrestle. I still to this day have wrestled with, those are sons and daughters of God who wanted to participate in something. But we did sense that God was doing something very unique, and no one like that got upset with us. They understood, and there was 2 even things in that. There was times where we would have someone older teach, or lead worship, and you could feel the room shift, and then you put another Gen Z leader in that role, and it would kick back up. And and I think some people can be frustrated with that, but like outpourings or these encounters are for people. There was a reason why he did it at a college campus. There was a reason why he did it in Kentucky and not in Melbourne, Australia. And that is terribly sad and dissatisfactory to some people, but also just what God does. Like God does meet people in certain places for certain purposes.
Yeah.
That it would be awesome if he came and uniquely met boomers.
Yeah.
Because they need it too. But for some reason, he did do it seemingly for the young. So that was one thing. And then even something that I wrestled with, and this has been a way you can pray for me, or whoever's listening can pray for me, is my journey was very unique because, and this is me just being very vulnerable, but I'm a nobody, you know? And then I all of a sudden can't go outside without people wanting to take pictures with me. I can't go outside because worship outside will stop. Because, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden I have a name and a face.
Yeah.
That even like a week into the experience, I was asking the other leaders, like, do I need to remove myself? Because I am the very thing that we're like.
Yeah, as we're talking about this.
Yeah. So, but what was awesome was my leaders told me to chill out and relax and just check my heart, you know, because God does use people.
Right.
And
that's the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah.
Is we can become so anti.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want anybody. We don't want anybody's name attached to it, but God does use names. He's got a Abraham. He's got a Moses. He's got a Paul.
Yeah.
You know, that he used in significant ways.
Yeah. So just, you know, it's been 2.5 years really of wrestling with that personally of, okay, how do I do this? Honoring what God was doing there, but also stepping forward into what God created me to do. With this, you know, this concept that we've been talking about is consecrated confidence for
Zach,
that moment.
Zach, how did you guys come to the decision to close it down? Because, I mean, if you're in the middle of a historic outpouring, and it's not for the sake of history, I get that, but even when we're like in moments, even on a smaller scale, leading a church or a meeting or a young adult meeting, and you begin to sense God doing something, there's always that tension of we have to close this down, we have to move on to the next thing, or do we keep it going? And there's so many times that leaders wrestle with that. This was like that time, 1000x.
Yeah.
And I wondered about that. It's like, what was it that you knew that you guys needed to close it down? And on the other side of it, have you since looked back on it and said, did we do the right thing?
Yeah, yeah. I'll answer your second question. I go to counseling almost every week, and probably the first year that was a consistent wrestles.
Wow.
Did I?
Wow.
And everywhere I go, this question comes up.
Sure.
Right. And that's understandable.
Because everybody wants to make sure that,
yeah.
you know, we're not.
Or are you that ridiculous? You know, are you that dumb? You know, whatever. And what I've landed at, and people might disagree with this, but this has been something I've landed at, is God is not upset with my limits. He's not upset. He's created me as a human with limits. So use this example. If I decided not to sleep for 4 days, there need to be a intervention to make me lay down, right?
Right.
Because I have limits, and God's not frustrated with that. Asbury University has limits because it was chartered to be a university that had about 1,000 students that were there, sent by their families, funded by their families or whatever, to go to school. and they have to stay accredited or that university folds. Not everyone on the university was excited about what was happening.
That's interesting.
That's a whole nother thing. And that's okay. We had multiple students that didn't leave their dorm for 2 weeks. We had to figure out how to feed them because they were so afraid of what was happening. Not because they're bad people, but it was a new thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have kids still at Asbury that don't have to go to chapel because they're triggered and they have a letter from a doctor saying they don't have to go to chapel.
Wow.
Because we have limits.
Mm-hmm.
This city had limits. It's not even a city. It's
that
a small
subway
town.
couldn't handle
That
all
subway,
that.
right? It had limits. The plumbing had limits. The highways had limits. And if God wanted to supernaturally multiply the lanes into Wilmore on the highway, he could have, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
If he wanted for someone to endow Asbury with $1 billion to continue moving on and create an event venue that could steward this, he could have, but he didn't.
So within the confines
the confines of Asbury, and the reality is everyone was a guest at Asbury's house.
Mm.
So when it boiled down, not to put blame on them, but when it boiled down, they were our host. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They invited me to stay.
Yeah.
They invited a couple of other people to join, but they were the hosts. And Kevin Brown, the president of Asbury, who honestly needs to be on 10 times the podcast I'm on. He needs to write 10 times more books than I am. You need to spend time with him.
Mm.
That man is the epitome of adaptive leadership, courageous leadership, spiritual resiliency. He stood up in it at key pivotal moments during the outpouring, and he made a hard decision. And for 16 days, lots of people liked his hard decision.
Right.
And there was a time that he had to make a hard decision that not everyone liked.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. And but he made the right decision. So in that moment, we really did pray that it was catalyzed and not canceled. By the grace of God, some supernatural experience. 2 years prior, Asbury had already signed a contract to host an event on February 23rd that had the simulcasting ability to send it around the world. Not knowing it was going to be the outpouring, they thought it was going to be the collegiate day of prayer.
Wow.
So, and Francis Chan, Rick Warren, and a well-known worship band was supposed to be there. They all removed themselves from that event. And that event gave up so much of what they had been contracted to be able to do in Hughes Auditorium for us to have a catalytic last 3 hours of the outpouring that 4.9 million people watched around the world.
Man.
Almost every TV station, in the Middle East, TV networks were picking it up.
Yeah.
Because they had heard about it on social media.
Yeah.
4.9 million people watched. One of my favorite things is a sophomore in college preached. It wasn't me. It wasn't Tyson. It wasn't you. I was up till 3 a.m. at Waffle House with him the night before because his sermon was an hour and a half. He had practiced it. So you got 7 minutes, bro. We got some work to do. He preached. 13,000 people came to Christ.
My gosh.
It was his first sermon. You know what he does now? He leads worship at a 100-person church in rural Kentucky. He loves his new wife. He's a good, godly dude. Because God uses ordinary, unremarkable people and accelerates and intensifies the work. So what's awesome is there was kind of this apostolic mantle that I think happened that day on a few of us. There's about 4 of us have been traveling since.
Yeah, tell it real briefly. Just like, what are you doing now? What do you do when you fold up revival and put it away like, like Christmas decorations?
Yeah, I really do believe that I've created God gave me a mantle to be a Joshua and Caleb, to be a Barnabas, to be a herald of, hey, I saw the land, it's good. Don't go weary, don't lose heart. So now I get to travel the world to countries and conferences and churches and college campuses and tell stories. And after a little bit, it's been distilled to like a couple things that I feel that are my role to impart and teach on, just mostly about the interior life to steward.
Talk about your book real quick. I know you're a terrible self-promoter like I am, so I'm going to promote it.
But it's hard to hustle a book on this topic. But, but as I've processed, is throughout the story of God, the problem's been pride, and the solution's been humility. Like since the beginning. Yeah. And in heaven, when it's all done, it'll be the most humble place that we've ever experienced. No one's going to be comparing or competing. Everyone's going to be staring at Jesus on the throne. No one's going to want to wear a crown. They will end up exactly where they're supposed to be. And we won't be comparing one another's mansions, if that's even theologically, whatever. It's going to be the most humble place. So when people asked me to write, they wanted me to just write about Asbury, and I didn't feel like I didn't feel like that was my role. But what I could do was share some stories from Asbury and unpack some of my story and what I've wrestled with. And it's a book called Lower, based off this concept of if we become low places, then God might puddle up his presence. And in my own experience, kind of this Luke 14 parable of, will you go recline at the lowest seat, and when the host invites you up, you can walk in consecrated confidence, sit in that seat and do what he's called you to do. So, Lower came out in January 2025, and it's been a wild ride, but it's a book on humility, and hopefully that we just, sow into the church to be a humble people so God can come close. Yeah.
It's beautiful. So if you haven't gotten the book, you guys need to get it. It's called Lower. Zach Meerkreebs. You can get it every place you get books. He won't self-promote it because he has to be humble.
Because I have good friends like Lee who will do it for me.
Absolutely. And I tell you should do it because he's walked it out, lived it out, and you do carry that Barnabas, that Joshua, that Caleb grace upon your life, because I've been around you and it's like life to me. It's encouraging. You could have built something around yourself. Hey, look at me. But you've chosen not to do that. You really have embodied what it means to be low. I know you're human. You've got limits. But you really have done that, Zach. And
thank you.
Thanks for jumping on here and sharing it. I know you probably shared it like 10 billion times, but I really believe that there are people listening that it's like to hear you say, hey, the land is good. Yeah. And it is still out ahead of us.
And don't grow weary in sowing.
Don't grow weary. And it's worth contending for. So thanks a lot for jumping on here with us.
Bro. Yeah. I love you, man.
All right. Love you too.